So what does it take for young people to get together? This is really, for me, a crucial question. We can do all kinds of things for them, right? We often talk about student-centered learning, but we always talk about it as students as the object of adult attention, not as the subjects of their own lives. And for me, student-centered means we start with the students and their experience and their description of what's going on, their understanding, and move outward rather than forming a network of adults around them coming in at them. And that's the difference. What do students need to get together? Well, they need to have skills for talking across differences. They need to have skills for solving problems and working things out. They need to have safe places that they can come together. They need to have information about the history of how people have come together in our society, the various kinds of social movements and organizing by various kinds of people for various kinds of issues, so they know that there's a long history of people getting together. And they need adult support. They need adult allies. So what I want to talk about in the next few minutes as I close up is, what does it mean to be an adult ally? What is that? What do we have to think about in order to help young people get together? First of all, I think that when I talk about being an adult ally to young people, often people immediately go to that place, well, these are things I can do for young people. But most of the work, when you're an adult ally of young people, is with other adults, right? Those of us who are white and have done anti-racism work know that a lot of our work is with other white people. And a lot of the work I did for many years at the Oakland Men's Project as a man was to work with other men to stop the violence. Well, it's the same thing when talking about working with young people, is that a lot of what's in the way of young people succeeding is not themselves and is not other young people, it's the adults around them. And that means that we need to step up as allies and challenge those adults, challenge those adult-run systems, and when we're in places where decisions are getting made about young people, we need to be saying, why aren't there any young people here? How many times do we sit in meetings, organizations, situations where major resources, major institutional practices are getting decided about young people, and there isn't anyone under 30 in the room? We need to be speaking up for young people's voice and presence in those kinds of situations. We also need to be thinking about what are the kinds of institutional practices and assumptions in our educational system will actually support young people thriving and growing. And I'm just going to list a few that I think are really important places to start in thinking about the whole educational system. First of all, that we have to make sure that we include not only student voices, but parent voices and teacher input and leadership at every stage of the way. We have to eliminate tracking. We know that tracking is a disaster. It doesn't work. We have to eliminate suspensions. We know that there is no reason to kick students, young people, out of school. They want to be in school. It's our responsibility to figure out a way that makes it meaningful for them to be there. And if we fail at that, if we find ourselves suspending students, then we have to look at the adult-created systems that are pushing them out. And I've seen schools completely transform themselves when they had a zero suspension policy, because then it forced them to come up with the kinds of programs that would keep students in school. So instead of zero tolerance, we need zero suspensions. We need to assume that all activities at our schools are going to be integrated by race and class and everything else. Social clubs, athletic programs, field trips, any kind of activity. Students want to be together across differences, but they don't know how, and they can't do it without our support and without us giving them the expectation that that's how we live in community together. We have to provide teacher training and support, and it has to be connected to student outcomes. Now, a lot of the things we do to train teachers or support teachers are great for teachers, but they don't necessarily lead to different outcomes in the classroom. We know there is no teacher that I've ever observed or talked with who hasn't, because we've grown up, and been raised and trained in a racist system, we don't have subtle ways that we pass on racism in our classrooms. Just like I've seen where there's a video of feminist teachers who had years of experience trying to be gender neutral in the classroom. They were filmed, and the video, they were completely surprised to find that there were some subtle and some not so subtle ways in which they were differentially responding to the boys and the girls. The same thing in terms of race and class. None of us are perfect. We have to be accountable and, assess our practices. We also need to overhaul the curriculum. There is a lot of curriculum materials out there. There's a tremendous amount of multiracial ways to teach science, to teach math, as well, of course, as literature and history. There is no excuse for our kids growing up with textbooks that are 10, 20, 30, 40 years old that are completely not only outdated, but are erroneous, are misleading, are inaccurate. So that's another area that we have to look. We have to provide specialized support for students so that as soon as they start to fall through the cracks, we are there to pick them up and say, wait a second, what do you need? And finally, we have to ensure safe campuses. And we can't do that by security screening. We can't do it by security guards. Safety has to come from within, from a strong and empowered student body, from teachers and administrators who are committed to supporting students. It's not that difficult to create safe campuses, but it takes a complete change in mindset to think about it not in terms of security and high-tech procedures and identity badges and all this other stuff, to terms of what does it really take to make students feel safe at school. And finally, we need to aim at nothing less than 100% graduation rates and eligibility and preparation for college for every single student. That has to be the goal, and that has to be what we're accountable to. Anything less than that, when we failed some of our students, and we know which ones that will be. So I just want to say a couple of things in closing. First of all, I've never met a parent who did not want their child to succeed, and I've never met a young person who did not want to succeed in school. It's not the fault of students. It's not the fault of parents. We've got to look at the structure, the institutional practices of the educational system. So the questions I want to leave you with, the first one is, are you an ally to young people? And particularly to young people of color and low-income youth. And what does that mean to you? What is the practice of an ally? What is the daily behavior of an ally in terms of working with young people in the educational system? And part of that is, are you helping young people get together? This is not about doing things for young people. Young people, even at very early ages, are incredibly competent and capable people. What they need is support in getting together with other young people and with adults to address the issues we face in our schools. And I want to leave you with a quote from my Jewish tradition, Rabbi Tarfon. He said very simply, and this is immediately applicable to the work of an ally, "It's not upon you to complete the work, neither are you free to desist from it." In other words, we each have a role to play, and it's about finding our role. And it comes back to that question that I started with at the very beginning. Who do you stand with? Do you stand with the children of color in this community? Do you stand with the low-income students? Do you stand with the immigrant students? Do you stand with the gay, lesbian, bi, and trans students? Do you stand with the young women? And every group, in whatever way they are marginalized or pushed out of the school system. So the final thing to think about is, what is your next step? And today is a day to work with other people here to think about strategically, what are the next steps? We each have a next step individually, but we also have collective next steps. And this is a great opportunity today to meet some other allies, to meet some other adults in the community who want to make a difference, And so the process can really take a giant step forward.